Welcome to e-discussion on Indian Evidence Act. Let us discuss the provisions of Section 133 of the Act. What it provides? That whether there can be a conviction solely of basing on the evidence of an accomplice. Whether it provides that a conviction is not illegal basing on the evidence of an accomplice. What it says? Accomplice shall be a competent witness against whom? Against the co-accused. And a conviction is not illegal merely because it proceeds upon the uncorroborated testimony of an accomplice. The evidence, this section is to be read with the provisions of section 114 B of the Act. What section 114B of the Evidence Act provides? It provides the court may presume that an accomplice is unworthy of credit. That is, accomplice is unworthy of credit unless his evidence is corroborated with material particulars. Now, 114B says that an accomplice is unworthy of credit unless he is corroborated in material particulars. There are two provisions. Here in section 133 it has been provided that an accomplice is a competent witness and a conviction if it is recorded on the merely means without corroborative evidence, merely on the evidence on our accomplice is not illegal. But here in section 114B, it has been provided the court may presume that an accomplice is unworthy of credit unless he is corroborated in material particulars. So, both these provisions of the Evidence Act have been taken together while considering accomplice evidence. So now case laws have settled the rule that as a matter of prudence, there should not be conviction basing on the uncorroborated testimony of an accomplice. Accomplice, that is section 133, though says that it is not illegal merely if a conviction is recorded merely on the evidence of an accomplice. But in view of the provisions in section 114B, that the court may presume that an accomplice is unworthy of credit unless his evidence is corroborated with material particulars. So case laws have settled the matter that there should not be conviction basing on the uncorroborated testimony of an accomplice. Some amount of corroboration is required. So you should know who is an accomplice. Accomplice has not been defined in the Act, but he is somehow or other who has taken part in a crime. He is to be treated as accomplice. So it is generally understood that an accomplice means a guilty associate or a partner in a crime. In general, accomplice is a guilty associate or a partner in a crime. So in some heinous offences, tender of pardon is given as per the provisions of the CRPC. The evidence of a co-accused is taken with a condition that if he discloses the truth, then he will be pardoned. Such a provision is there because of necessity, when other evidence are not available, then in order to punish some of the accused persons, one accused is given the pardon. Tender is there, offer. There is an offer of giving pardon to one of the accused if he discloses the truth. If he doesn't disclose the truth, then the tender of pardon will be withdrawn and he will be tried accordingly. Now section, that is, he is popular, sometimes we say he is an approver to whom a tender of pardon is given. An approver evidence has to satisfy the double test, that is, his evidence must be reliable and his evidence should be sufficiently corroborated. This is approval evidence. That is a accomplice evidence. That is to be read together. You will find there are many case law on the matter. So this accomplice, who is accomplice you should know, who has taken part in a crime, who is a guilty associate in a crime, who is one of the accused persons in a crime, but sometimes because of necessity, the evidence of an accomplice is taken, and if there will not be conviction, if a conviction is recorded merely on the accomplice evidence, then that's not illegal, but in view of the provisions of section 114b, that an court may presume that an accomplice is unworthy of credit unless his evidence is corroborated to the material particulars. Now, the law has been settled by the Honorable Supreme Court that there should not be conviction basing on the sole testimony of an accomplice. Some corroboration is required. Now, section 134. To prove a fact, how many witnesses, examination of how many witnesses is required. So sometimes a layman thinks that more number of witnesses, the better proof is there. A person is not, unless a particular number of witnesses is not required to be examined to prove a particular fact. So evidence is to be weighed in quality, not in quantity. Nowhere the law requires, the Evidence Act doesn't require that to prove a particular fact, a particular number of witnesses, the testimony is required. Even a fact can be proved basing on the evidence of a solitary witness, one witness. So if the circumstances, facts and circumstances of each case are to be considered separately to whether that evidence is sufficient to record a conviction. For an example, there is a rape case, and in the dead hour of night, the only victim's evidence is sufficient to record a conviction, because the possibility of this witnessing the incident by other persons, there is no chance, because it is a secluded place, it is a far off place. Suppose in a forest, somebody rapes commits the offense of rape against a woman, that the woman's evidence is sufficient. So here, most of the cases of this, a conviction can be recorded. Even a conviction of murder can be recorded, basing on the testimony of a sole witness, only witness, if that is believable. The cross-exam, that witness stood the rigor of cross-examination, and nothing is found to distrust him, disbelieve him. So when nothing is found, even in spite of his cross-examination, he remained firm about his examination chief, and his believable is quite natural, his evidence is believable, then basing on the sole testimony, sole evidence of only one evidence, conviction can be recorded. So that's why section 134 provides, no particular number of witnesses shall in any case be required for the proof of any fact, either to prove a fact in a civil case or in a criminal case. No particular number of witnesses shall in any case be required. No particular this, even basing on the evidence of a single witness, if the witness is believable, then the fact can be proved. No particular number of witnesses is required to prove a particular fact. No particular number shall in any case, no, in any case, be required for the proof of any fact. So it is open for the final court to fact to believe or disbelieve a statement, but simply because the statement is of one witness. For that reason, there should not be an inference that fact is not true. So the public are generally reluctant to come forward to depose before the court when a crime is committed. It is the reaction of the public. Everybody knows, nobody comes forward. Most of the persons do not come forward to depose in criminal case to prove a fact. Either they are afraid of to the accused, or they are not interested, or they do not want to take the trouble of coming to the court and to face the police. Even some persons, those who have knowledge about the incident, they deny their knowledge before the investigating officer, even before the court. But if one witness, he deposes against the accused and his evidence is believable, then basing on the evidence of that particular person, particular single witness, a conviction can be recorded. So this is conviction on the basis of testimony of a sole witness, only one witness. So there can be a conviction. So because 134, you should remember, so no particular number of witnesses is required shall be required to prove the fact in a particular case. That is section 134. Now let us discuss these provisions in chapter 10, chapter X, that is of the examination of witness. You know, the court sees the incident through the witness. The witness is the eye and ear of the court. Through witness, the incident is proved or a fact is proved. So, in such case, in what order witnesses are to be examined, what questions are to be put, what are the restrictions in putting certain questions to the witnesses, all such matters are dealt in chapter 10. What provides? Section 135 provides order of production and examination of witness. In which order? It doesn't say the quality or quantity of the witness, what said in what order? In what order a witness is to be produced and examined. Section 135 says the order in which witnesses are produced and examined, the order in which witness will be taken or witnesses are produced and examined, shall be regulated by the law and practiced for the time being relating to civil and criminal procedure respectively. In order in which evidence, witness or witness is produced and in which he is to be examined, evidence is to be taken, that is regulated by the law. If in a civil case, under the Civil Procedure Code, or in a criminal case, under the Criminal Procedure Code. In Order 18, detailed provision has been made regarding hearing of the suit. What it says? The party who has a right to begin. Always the plaintiff has a right to begin the suit. As per the provisions of Order 18, Rule 1, unless if the defendant admits the claim, the pleadings of the plaintiff and contends that for some other facts, the plaintiff is not entitled for relief. In such case, the plaintiff may reserve his right to give rebuttal evidence as in certain in those facts, and in such case the plaintiff will not give evidence. As the other side will give evidence, then the plaintiff will give rebuttal evidence. So that is the rule. Say Order 18 governs the order in which witnesses are to be examined in civil proceeding, civil suits. Similarly, under the Criminal Procedure Code, in a Criminal Procedure Code, how criminal cases are dealt? There are, if a different procedure is prescribed in the Criminal Procedure Code, for a trial of a summons case, certain procedure is to be followed. In a warrant case, a particular procedure is to be followed. A warrant case instead on police report, in warrant case instead otherwise than police report. Then in sessions cases, what procedure is to be followed? And who will begin? Who will give evidence in past? In what order evidence is to be given? That has been dealt in the Criminal Procedure Code. Always, in a criminal case, the prosecution gives his evidence first. Then the accused statement is recorded, and thereafter the defense, the evidence of the accused in defense is taken. So that's why Section 135 provides the order in which witnesses are produced and examined, not only produced and examined, are to be regulated by the law for the timing in force relating to civil and criminal procedure. So in the law which is in force in civil procedure for in order of examination of witnesses in civil case, in that order that is to be done. Similarly, in what order a particular criminal witnesses in a criminal case are to be produced and examined, in that order that is to be done. But and in the absence of any such law, suppose there is no law prescribing in which order the witnesses are to be produced and examined, in such case that is to be decided, that is according to the discretion of the court. Discretion of the court. That is Section 135. Now let us come to these provisions of Section 136. What is said? Those judge to decide as to admissibility of evidence when an evidence is tendered in court, either in a civil case or in a criminal case. Then who will decide whether the evidence is admissible or not? Obviously the judge. The parties cannot compel the judge to take whatever evidence they are giving in a particular case. The judge to decide whether that evidence is admissible. What is admissible? What is evidence may be given of fact in issue, to prove fact in issue, or relevant facts. Relevant facts. Or what is relevant? A fact is said to be relevant to other facts if that is connected to each other as per the provisions of relevant chapter. So that's why the judge will decide whether a particular evidence is relevant. If that evidence is irrelevant, then that evidence will not be taken. So Section 136 provides, when either party proposes to give evidence of any fact, either party, in a civil case, either the plaintiff or the defendant, in a criminal case, the prosecution or the accused, they proposes to give evidence, then the judge may ask the party. The judge has the discretion to ask the party proposing to give the evidence, the party who proposes to give evidence, in what manner the alleged fact, if proved, would be relevant. The judge has the discretion. Judge may put a question. Put the party who wants to proposes to give evidence. Judge may ask that party, in what manner that evidence will prove, if that is given, in what manner the alleged fact, if that fact is proved, if alleged fact is proved, would be relevant. How that fact would be relevant. And the judge shall admit the evidence if he thinks that the facts if proved would be relevant. If the judge will admit such evidence, if he thinks that if those facts are proved, that facts is relevant for the case, and then you will take evidence, and not otherwise, So that means, again, it has been mentioned in 136 that the court should take precaution for not taking irrelevant evidence. The court will always exclude irrelevant evidence. What it says, the party when proposes to give evidence to prove a particular fact, the judge may put a question to that party as to what manner that fact is relevant. If that party gives any reply or inform the court, thereafter the court will decide whether that fact is relevant, and in such case evidence will be taken. Otherwise, that evidence will not be taken. If the facts proposed to be proved is one of which evidence is admissible only upon proof of some other fact. Suppose fact proposed to be proved. Suppose evidence is given to prove a fact proposed to be proved. But is one of which evidence is admissible only upon proof of some other fact. Evidence is admissible on proof of one fact, on proof of other fact. And such last mentioned fact must be proved before evidence is given of the fact first mentioned. If, what is that? If the fact proposed to be proved is one of which evidence is admissible, if the evidence is admissible to prove a particular fact, this depends on the proof of some other fact. In such case, then the party who wants to give evidence on that fact must be proved before the evidence is given of the fact first mentioned. Unless the party undertakes to give proof of such fact and the court is satisfied with such undertaking. If the party gives an undertaking, no, first the evidence should be given. This evidence is to be, the proof of these facts depends on the proof of another fact. I undertake that I will prove that fact. In such case, evidence may be given. For an example, suppose evidence is given to prove a fact of a person who is dead. This dying declaration of a person is produced, is tendered in court, is produced in court to prove the commission of a particular murder, a particular offense. That is offense of murder. In such case, it is to prove that the person whose declaration is produced is dead. So if once the death of that person is proved, then the other evidence is admissible. In such case, the court may ask that person, you prove this fact, this case, the death of the person first, or thereafter your dying declaration will be taken. So, or if that person undertakes to prove that fact, basing on which the admissible evidence on a particular fact is depends. In such case, the court may also permit that person to give evidence on taking such undertaking. If the relevancy of one alleged fact depends upon another alleged fact, if the relevancy of one fact depends on depends upon another alleged fact being first proved, relevancy of a particular fact depends on the upon another alleged fact, relevancy on another alleged fact being first proved. First one fact is proved, then thereafter other fact is relevant, then the judge may, in his discretion, either permit evidence of the first fact to be, in such a discretion, judge has been given the discretion, either that to prove the first fact to be given before the second fact is proved, or require evidence to be given of the second fact before evidence is given of the facts, of the first fact. So what a discretion is given to the judge, suppose when the relevancy of one alleged fact, relevancy of one alleged fact depends upon the alleged fact being first proved, alleged fact being first proved, the judge may in his discretion either permit evidence of the first fact to be given, first fact evidence may be given to prove the first fact before second fact is proved, or require evidence to be from the, or the court may require that the second fact evidence may be given to prove the second fact, because if proving among this fact, the evidence, other fact is admissible, or second fact before it. Illustrations will make you clear what he says. It is proposed to prove a statement about a relevant fact by a person alleged to be dead. So what he says? Well, the party proposes the evidence in what manner the alleged fact, that is that if the fact proved is on one which evidence is admissible only upon the proof of some other fact, that is proviso. So this illustration is according to that proviso. What it says? It is proposed to prove a statement about a relevant fact by person alleged to be dead, which statement is relevant under section 32. So in such case, the fact that the person is dead must be proved by the person to prove the statement before evidence is given of the statement. That is, first it is to prove that person is dead, then only his statement will be admissible in evidence as dying declaration. Illustration B says, it is proposed to prove by a copy of the contents of a document said to be lost. Suppose a copy of a document is to be proved, saying that, stating that it is lost. So first, the court may, in such case, court has to ask, you prove the fact first that the document is lost, then the copy will be admissible. So in such case, it is proposed. So in short, the fact that the original is lost must be proved by your person proposing to produce the copy before the copy is produced. Third is A is accused of receiving stolen property knowing it to have been stolen. So in such case, the relevancy of any denial depends on the identity of the property. It is proposed to prove that the denied the possession of the property. Suppose it is proposed that the accused wants to prove that he had denied the possession of that property. In such case, the relevance of the denial depends on the identity of the relevancy, whether that denial is not, that denial also depends on the identity of that property. The court may, in its discretion, either require the property to be identified before the denial of the possession is proved. So, in such case, the court has the discretion either to give permit the party to give evidence before the denial, first to prove the identity of the property, or either require the property to be identified before the denial of the possession is proved, or permit the denial of the possession to prove before the property is identified. In either case, the court may first permit the party, you first prove the identity, then your denial. Or you may, denial is taken first, then identity is to be proved. Now, illustration this is, it is proposed to prove a fact which is said to have been the cause or effect of a fact issue. It is proposed to prove a fact which is a cause and effect of a certain fact issue. In such case, there are several intermediate facts. There may be several intermediate facts B, C, and D, which must be shown to exist before the cause or effect can be regarded as the case of effect of the fact in issue. The court may either permit A to be proved before B, C, and D is proved, or may require proof of B, C, and D before permitting proof of A. Suppose there is an attack, because of attack somebody sustained injury, he was under treatment and that he died. So before that, the court may permit in such case the regarding death and thereafter the other facts regarding some injury or somewhere where he was treated, also things are there. Section 136, you should know who will decide. Judge has a discretion. Judge has been given discretion. What that means, may ask, when a party proposes to give evidence on a particular fact, the judge will ask that party how this evidence is required and which fact it will be proved and how that fact is relevant for the purpose of the case. Then, on obtaining answer from the party, the judge will decide whether evidence is admissible to prove that fact and that fact is relevant for the case. Because at the beginning, the judge will give a check when an evidence is stated, which facts are to be proved, if that facts are relevant. If the judge finds no, evidence is given to prove a fact, but the fact is not relevant, or that is not the fact in issue, then evidence will not be given. But second discussion is given to the judge. When a particular fact is to prove, when evidence is admissible on proof of a particular fact, the judge may permit that person to give that evidence first and subsequent to prove the fact. So, or that is a discretion given. That is vice versa. That discretion is always available to the court. Now, section 136, that is evidence related to fact issue and also relevant. That is, in order to focus the attention of the litigant to this section is nothing but only to focus the attention of the litigant to confine their evidence on fact in issue and relevant facts. One fact on assurance may be proved, that is, on assurance of proof of one fact, the other fact may be proved. That is discretion. This is when the relevancy of one fact depends upon the proof of another fact. Relevancy of one fact depends on the proof of another fact. Then it judge shall full discretion to allow either fact to prove first. Either this may be proved or that may be proved. Question as to admissibility of evidence should be decided as they arise and should not be resolved until judgment is the case is given. So when admissibility of evidence, that should be decided first. But at the stage of judgment, such a finding must not be given. When a judge is in a doubt suppose judge is a doubt whether a particular evidence is admissible or not admissible, the Honorable Supreme Court has settled the law that in such case he should declare in favor of the admissibility. There is a doubt in the mind of the judge whether a particular evidence is admissible or not admissible. But always there should be a verdict that the evidence is admissible. This is section 137. Now section 137. What is? Sometimes you get a question, what is examination chief? What is cross-examination? What questions can be put in examination chief? When leading question can be put? What is leading question? Such a question you find invariably in competitive examinations. So both in this judicial service, decision examination. So what it says? Section 137 defines what is examination chief, what is cross-examination, that has been mentioned. One section 137 says, the examination of a witness by the party who calls him shall be called his examination in chief. Suppose if a question comes, what is examination of chief? If you have not understood, if you do not remember the definition, your answer will not be complete. What it says? The examination of the witness by the party who has called him shall be called his examination in chief. First examination is not there. You may somebody say the examination of the witness in the first examination is called examination. No, that is not the answer. The answer will be the examination of the witness by the party who has called him to give evidence. That is called examination in chief. Suppose plaintiff has brought a witness. He wants to examine him. Whatever examination will be done by him, that will be called examination chief. So that section 137 says, the examination of witness by the party who calls him, the party who will call him for examination. If he examines, whatever examination is done by that party, that will be called as examination chief. Then cross-examination. The examination of a witness by the adverse party shall be called his cross-examination, not subsequent to examination chief. That is not there. The examination of the witness by the adverse party shall be called cross-examination. The examination, what is examination chief? The examination of the witness by the party who calls him for examination, that is called examination chief. The examination of the witness by the adverse party is called cross-examination. Then examination, what is re-examination? That is re-cross-examination, subsequent. The examination of a witness subsequent to the cross-examination by the party who called him shall be called his re-examination. So, the examination of the witness by the party who calls a person for examination subsequent to the cross-examination is called re-examination. Now you are clear what is examination chief, what is cross-examination, and what is re-examination. What section 137 says? The examination of the witness by the party who calls him for examination is called examination chief. Then the cross-examination, the examination of the witness by the adverse party is called cross-examination. What is re-examination? The examination of the party who calls a particular witness after cross-examination, subsequent to cross-examination, is called re-examination. Now you are clear. What is examination chief? What is cross-examination? What is re-examination? Now, let us discuss what is order of examination. Then, how examination? Then whether cross-examination is to be done first, whether examination is to be done. What it says? Order of examination. So here in 136, order of production of evidence. That is there, and evidence and the witnesses. So here, order of examination. Witness shall be first examined chief. 138 says, the witness shall be first examined chief. Then, if the adverse party so desires, cross-examine. So cross-examine is not a compulsory for the adverse party. If the adverse party desires, then that witness will be cross-examined. And then if the party calling him so desires, re-examine. If the party who has called that witness, if it so desires, that will be re-examination. So in order, first there will be examination chief. If the other adverse party so desires, if he examines, that will be called cross-examination. That will be cross-examination. If thereafter, subsequent to cross-examination, the party who has called that witness for examination, if he examines that person, then that will be called re-examination. That re-examination is different. The examination and cross-examination must relate to relevant facts. Examination and cross-examination must relate to relevant fact. But examination and cross-examination, both most relevant to facts, always. But the cross-examination need not be confined to the fact to which the witness testified on his examination chief. So, very important it is to be understood. Sometimes, cross-examination, if a question is put, which has not been brought in the examination chief, on that ground, that is objected by the defense, by the prosecution, accused, or the advocate for the prosecution. Or sometimes, so what it says, because cross-examination need not be confined to the examination chief, but always must be of relevant facts. So what it says, the examination and cross-examination must relate to relevant facts. This Lakshmana Rekha is that both examination chief and cross-examination must be relevant facts. But the cross-examination need not be confined to the fact to witness testifies on his examination chief. So, as because some facts have not been answered, have not been brought in examination chief, if that fact is relevant for the purpose of the case, even such fact can be put in cross-examination. On such matter, there can be cross-examination. This section 138. What it says, examination and cross-examination must be of relevant fact, but the cross-examination need not be confined to the facts brought only to the evidence which has been brought in the examination chief. In cross-examination, some other facts, if those are relevant to the case, on those facts, evidence, the cross-examination can be made. Now, section 138 at the cost of repetition, that I want to bring to your knowledge that the examination and cross-examination must relate to relevant facts, but the cross-examination need not be confined to the fact to which the witness testified. The witness testified, whatever stated on his examination chief. So, even if an examination chief, a witness has not tested anything about the relevant fact, then on that fact, their witness can be cross-examined. So what is section? Witness shall be first examined, then thereafter cross-examination if the party so desires, adverse party desires, and if the party who has brought it, if he so desires, there will be re-examination. The both examination chief and cross-examination must be must be related to facts in issue, but cross-examination need not be confined to the testimony. To the testimonies means whatever a witness has deposed, examination chief. But it can go beyond that, but that must be within the boundary of relevant facts, within the boundary line, whether of the relevancy of facts. That is section 138. Now section 130, that then there it also again it re-exam. Then when re-exemption shall be directed? The re-exam shall be directed only to explain the matters brought in the cross-examination. Re-examination shall be directed only to explain some matters brought in the cross-examination, some new facts. And if new matter is asked, that is always to be made with the permission of the court, but to introduce re-examination. So if new matter is reintroduced in re-examination, then the adverse party may further cross-examine upon that matter. So now, on what facts there will be re-examination? So the rule is that the re-examination may be made to explain the facts, explain the evidence brought in the cross-examination. Suppose in the examination chief, some matter have been omitted, some facts, some evidence ought to have been given, but on those points there was no examination chief. In such case, with the permission of the court, the party who has brought a witness, he may re-examine. But if a new matters are introduced in re-examination, then immediately the adverse party gets an opportunity, gets a right to further cross-examine. That is called further cross-examination. What is further cross-examination? First examination chief, then there was cross-examination, then re-examination. Re-examination must be, a rule says that re-examination will be made to explain the evidence brought in the cross-examination. Some, if there may be introduction of new matters in the re-examination with the permission of the court, but always must be relevant fact. If some new matters are brought in the re-examination, then the adverse party gets a right to further cross-examine. That means the cross-examination of the adverse party to the witness after re-examination, that is called further cross-examination. That is called further cross-examination. This is section 138. Now lectures of the provisions of section 139. What section 139 says? Cross-examination of person called to produce of document. Cross-examination of a person, produce document. When a person is summoned by court to produce a document, he will not be called as a witness until he is examined as a witness. He cannot be cross-examined as a witness until he is examined as a witness. So section 139 provides that merely because a person produces a document, he will not be a witness so long he has not appeared in the witness box for his examination. What it says? Section 139 says, a person summoned to produce a document does not become a witness by the mere fact that he produces it. If a person has been summoned to produce document, he simply comes and produces that document in the court. So by mere production of that document, he will not become a witness and cannot be cross-examined. In such case, he cannot be cross-examined unless and until he is called a witness. When he is called a witness, that means if that person is examined as a witness, the person who has been summoned to produce a document and he was examined and he is examined as a witness by the party at whose instance he is producing the document, then only he will become a witness and thereafter he can be cross-examined. So now section 139 says, what it provides, that a person who produces a document, as because simply mere production of a document will not give a right to the adverse party to cross-examine. Only when he is examined as a witness by the party at whose instance, as per whose desire or as per on whose prayer that party has been summoned to produce document, and if that person is examined as a witness, then only the adverse party gets a right to cross-examine. This is section 139. Now, section 140 is a very small section. What is a witness to character? Witness to character. You know when character becomes relevant. In civil case, character is relevant. In criminal case, good character, bad character of the accused is not relevant. But when evidence of good character is given, then only evidence may be given to previous conviction, and that is there. So when witness to character may be cross-examined and re-examined. Suppose a witness is given to prove somebody's character. Witness to a character is given, then in such case, he may be cross-examined and re-examined. This section must be read with section 53. In most cases, witnesses to character not only may, but may also be cross-examined. Witness is given to a character, he is to be cross-examined. So here, character evidence is to assist the court in testimonying the value of the evidence. Why character evidence? Because somebody's evidence is given on character. That is estimating the value. Suppose one evidence is, one witness's character is also, some evidence is to given to prove the character of a witness. Then in such case, that witness may be cross-examined and re-examined. Now section 141. What is this leading question? What is leading question? Leading question has been defined in section 141. Any question put to a witness suggesting answer by the person who expects to get that answer from the witness, that is called leading question. For an example, is not your name is Rama? He may say either yes or no. So in such case, that will be a leading question. Whether you are present at the spot or not, he may say yes or not. Sometimes, whether it is a leading question or not. Leading question, suggesting, but that is not a leading question. Suggesting answer. Answer is suggested. Answer is stored. And asking the witness to give an answer which he knows that such a type of answer will be given by that person. What is that leading question? Any question suggesting the answer which the person putting it wishes or expects to receive. Any question suggesting the answer which the person who puts that question, what he thinks, wishes or expects. He wishes that he will give such an answer or expect that he will give such answer. He is called a leading question. So any question put to a witness suggesting the answer which the person puts that question wishes or expects to get is called leading question. That is only defined in section 141. What is leading question? Any question suggesting answer which the person puts what he wishes or expects. Both expects and wishes may not be same. Wishes or expects that to receive is called a leading question. Then when leading question will be asked? Always rule is that leading question will not be asked in examination chief if objected by the other party. So if is there, if when a leading question is put in examination chief, if other party is not objecting, then that is lawful. So what it says? Leading question must not be asked in examination chief if objected by the other party. What it says? Leading question must not, if objected by the adverse party, be asked in the examination, only examination chief. Leading question must not be asked in examination chief if objected by the other party or in re-examination, except with permission of the court. So putting a leading question. So rule is that leading question cannot be put to a witness in examination chief or re-examination if objected by the other party without the, except with the permission of the court. Then with the permission of the court, leading question can be put by a person in examination chief to a witness in examination chief or re-examination. That means leading question cannot be asked in exemptionship or re-examination if objection is there, but with the permission of the court, such leading question can be put in examination or cross-examination. The court shall permit leading question as to the matters which are introductory or undisputed, or which have in its opinion been already sufficiently proved. Then when the court will permit leading question, if objected by the adverse party, will not be put in examination or re-examination unless there is permission of the court. Then when court will give permission? The court will give permission to give put leading question when the same are introductory. Introductory means you are related to the accused, your name is such, your village is such, those are introductory. Or or undisputed. Some facts which are undisputed. Then in such case the court will permit for putting of leading question. Or which have already been sufficiently proved, or which fact have already in other evidence have been sufficiently proved. This section 142 and 141 are to be dealt with, are to be stated in answering what is leading question. What section leading question say? Leading question is a question in which a person who suggesting answer. If a question suggesting answer put by a person who wishes or expects to give such answer is called a leading question. Leading question when asked, leading question will not be put in examination, cross-examination or re-examination if objected by the party, but the same can be put if permission is given. When court will give permission? The court will give permission for putting leading question when those questions are introductory or those which have, in the opinion of the court, already been proved and undisputed or undisputed. Leading question may be asked in cross-examination. So far as cross-examination is concerned, there is no restriction in putting leading question. There is a blanket check is given in section 143 of the Evidence Act that in cross-examination the adverse party can put leading question. What is that leading question? Leading question means any question suggesting answer which the person puts, wishes or expects to get from the witness. That is leading question. What is leading question may be asked in cross-examination. 144. Evidence as to matter in writing. Suppose there is a matter in writing. Whether oral evidence is admissible or not. Sometimes, always, the contents of a document are to be proved by the document, by producing the document itself, or by primary evidence or secondary evidence, as the case may be. But here, section 144 provides evidence as to matter in writing. Any witness may be asked whilst under examination, either examination or cross-examination, whether any contract, grant or disposition property as to which is giving evidence was not contained in a document. So when a witness is examined in court regarding any matter which has been reduced into form of a document, regarding any matter, or whether any contract, grant or other disposition, three things, contract, grant or other disposition property as to which is giving evidence has been reduced, contained in a document. And if he says that it was, when any contract, grant or disposition has been entered into a document, contained in a document, if he says yes, then if he is about to make any statement as to the contents of it, or if he says that it was, that means yes, or if that person gives an answer in affirmative. So when a witness gives evidence regarding existence of a contract, grant or disposition of property, then in such case, question may be put whether to answer whether that content, that those grant, disposition, property was reduced into a document. And if he says, or if he is about to make any statement as to the contents of a document. Suppose that witness, this is another clause, suppose that witness is about to give evidence the regarding existence of a grant, this disposition property or contract, that it was mentioned in the document, then the adverse party may object to such evidence. Then the adverse party may object giving of such oral evidence by that witness until such document is produced. This section 144 puts a bar that once a witness deposes before the court that there was a grant, there was a contract or disposition property, and in such case the adverse party may put a question. Then in such case, to which he is giving evidence, that means as to which was not, then the grant or disposition, then a question may be put to him that whether that contract, grant or disposition of property was contained in a document, or if he is about to make any statement as to contents of which is in the opinion of the court ought to be produced, or he is about to give evidence regarding existence of a document containing a contract, grant, disposition, then the adverse party may object to such evidence. The adverse party will object such evidence until that document is produced. Suppose the plaintiff has brought a witness and examining that witness regarding the existence of a contract, grant or disposition of property. So in such case, he may be asked by the adverse party whether that contract, grant or disposition was reduced in the form of a document. If he says yes, or if that witness is about to give a statement that the grant, disposition or a contract was reduced into form of a document, then in such case the adverse party has a right to object the examination of such witness until that document is produced. That adverse party will raise immediately, a question will be raised that as per section 144, his examination should not be done, should be postponed till the production of the document, or until the facts have been proved which are entitled to party who called the witness to give a secondary evidence, or until it is proved that the original is lost or he is entitled to give a secondary evidence. This is section 100. What it provides? That when a witness is examined in court what? To prove any matter regarding a contract, grant or disposition property, then he may be asked whether that grant, contract or disposition property was reduced into writing. If he says yes, then the adverse party has a right to object his examination until the production of that document. Second clause provides, when that witness is about to give a statement, stating that a contract, grant or disposition property was reduced into a document, in such case, the adverse party has also a right to object the examination of such witness till that document is produced. Till that document is produced. But that is until that document is produced, or until it is proved that the party who is examining that witness is entitled to give a secondary evidence. That is, the original is lost. A witness may give oral evidence of a statement made by other person about the contents of document if such statements are in themselves relevant facts. This explanation makes it clear. A witness may give oral evidence when such statement made by other persons about the contents of a document if such statements are in themselves, statements are themselves relevant. So here, illustration makes the explanation clear. What it says? The question is whether A assaulted B. So here, she deposes that he heard A say to D. She deposes that A say, he had heard that A said to D about such assault. B wrote a letter accusing me of theft, and I will be revenged on him. This statement is relevant as showing his motive for the assault. So here what it says, witness may give oral evidence of a statement made by other person about the contents of it, though it is in a contents of document, that is in the letter, but that will prove the motive of some person. So that's why that statement, that statement, though the document is not produced, that is relevant. What is section says? A witness may give oral evidence of statements made by other person about the contents of it. A statement which has been made given by other person regarding the contents of document, if that is themselves relevant facts. The illustration will make you clear. Suppose, what is that? The question is whether A assaulted B. In a trial, A is facing trial for her cousin, hurt to B. She deposes that he heard A say to D. A the accuser said to D. B wrote about the assault. B wrote a letter accusing me of theft. B wrote a letter accusing me of theft, and I will be revenged on him. That is, who says that she deposes that he heard A said to D. A, who is accused, who had said to D that B wrote a letter accusing me of theft, and I will be revenged on him. This statement is relevant as showing A's motive, because though it is a form of a document, that becomes relevant on other provisions of the Evidence Act to prove the motive. So that's why even if that document is not produced, in such case oral evidence is admissible. This section is meant to enable parties to carry out the provisions of section 91. In section 91, 92 we have discussed when the forms contract, grant, disposition of property has been reduced into writing, no oral evidence will be admissible unless the document, or when secondary evidence is admissible. So that provision. So when a witness is about to give evidence as to any contract, grant or disposition property which is contained in document, or when he is about to make such statement regarding contract, grant, disposition property, so in such case, those evidence will not be admissible unless that document is produced or unless it is proved that the party is entitled to give second evidence. But explanation will make you clear. If that oral evidence is relevant in any other provisions of the, under any of the provisions of the Evidence Act, then that is admissible. Then cross-examination as to previous statement. It is a very important provision. Suppose a previous statement is given by a person in writing. That is 145. 145 sometimes is used to contradict a witness who has signed a document. What it says? A witness may be cross-examined as to previous statement made by him in writing. So if a witness has given a previous statement in writing, made by him in writing, or reduced in the writing, suppose a statement has been reduced, a statement of a witness is reduced into a writing, and relevant to matter in questions. First thing, a witness who has given any statement in writing, or whose statement has been reduced to in the form of writing, he may be cross-examined without such writing being shown to him or being proved. So he can be cross-examined. That means if a person himself has written a document, or he has given any statement in writing, or if his statement has been reduced into form of a writing, he can be cross-examined on those matters without such document being shown to him. But if it is intended to contradict him, only when the intention is to contradict that witness by the writing, by such writing, his attention must, before the writing can be proved, his attention must be brought before the writing can be proved, be called to those part of it which are to be used for the purpose of contradicting. Then his attention must be drawn to the portion of the document before that writing can be proved, be called to those part of it which are to be used for the purpose of contradicting. So what section say? This section indicates one of the mode in which the credit of a witness may be increased. Credit means credence, credibility, the believability of a witness is to be in question. In a way, this section is an exception to the general forbidding all use of contents of written documents. That is, contents of documents here something be excluded when there is a contradicting evidence. A written document until the document itself is produced. A witness may be cross-examined as to any statement as to relevant fact made by him on a formal occasion. A witness may be cross-examined about a relevant fact which he has given in writing when that is a document, or if a statement which has been given by him that has been reduced to into writing, but is intended without showing that document. But the simple section say provides if it is to be intended, if there is intention to contradict that witness which refers to that statement, contradicting means bearing. Here he is saying something and there is another statement, another type of statement in writing by himself, or another statement. Suppose police have reduced his statement in a different manner. In such case, that can be, he can be cross-examined on that matter. But for the purpose of contradicting is that portion of the statement which has been reduced into form of a writing or which he has given in writing, that must be shown to him. Part of which are to be used must be shown to him. His attendance must, before the writing can be proved, his attendance must before the writing be called to those part of it. That means those parts must be shown to him for the purpose of contradicting witness. So here, contradicting as regard the contention of the witness by a previous statement 162 is there only for contradicting, that can be used. Deposition of this section which has to be read with section 162 of the code clearly indicates that the attention of witness is to be called to the previous statement before the writing can be, but for the cross-examination only, that is not required. That is section 145 of the Evidence Act. It is a very important provision. Sometimes contradicting the previous statement in writing, or his statement of a witness in writing, that he can be cross-examined without showing that document, but if his contradiction, his evidence contradiction will be made, then the part of that evidence must be shown to him. So let us conclude. In the next class, we will discuss the remaining provisions from section 146. Thank you all.